Now he passes out.
Is he sleeping finally?
Yeah. As soon as I get everything set up here, now he decides, now I'm going to pass out.
At least he's asleep.
Yeah.
You
All
got
right,
to keep
here we
this
go.
in the video here.
I think I might have to.
Yeah.
All right. 3, 2. Welcome in, Minnesota sports fans, to another edition of Bring Me the Sports here on YouTube. Jonathan Harrison here, joined by the entire staff here at Bring Me the Sports. Will Raggets, Joe Nelson, Tony Liebert, Nolan O'Hara. We've got everybody today for a very special edition of Vikings on SI here on YouTube because it's week 1, boys. It couldn't be a better week. The NFL is finally actually back with regular season schedules. So let's start it off. We're going to do a pick-em today. We're going to pick the schedule. We're going to go through, make our picks. One of us is going to give the analysis every week on these games. So let's get started. Let's not waste any more time. Will, I'll let you give the analysis. So on week 1, New York Giants hosting the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, I expect the Vikings to win this game. I don't think they are going to blow out the New York Giants, but I think they are a better team. If this was at US Bank Stadium, I might predict a bigger victory. The fact that they have to go on the road is tough, and the Giants have some pieces up front with Dexter Lawrence and their edge rushers, but I really do think Brian Flores and this new upgraded Vikings defense with veterans at all 3 levels is going to give Daniel Jones, a lot of trouble. So I think the Vikings win in week 1.
I like it. Nolan, your pick for this week?
Yeah, I think they win in week 1 too.
All right, Joe, and then Tony.
27-0 Vikings. 1-0.
Joe's got scores. I love this. Joe's got scores ready to go.
I'll go the other way and say the Giants. I think week 1 on the road is tough.
The lone dissenter.
Weak.
I like it, Tony. Joe says week. All right, week 2, Nolan, you get the pick here. 49ers come to town against the Vikings in their home opener. Nolan, go ahead.
Right, yeah. I mean, I guess there's probably not much that needs to be said about the 49ers. Perennial power in the NFC. Very good team in the Super Bowl last year, obviously. Super strong defense. I don't think the Vikings will be able to do too much against them. I think it'll probably be a pretty convincing 49ers win.
Yeah, I like it. Joe?
You think that if you think the Vikings are lousy, but I think that's not the case. The Vikings will win this game. They'll start 2-0. You know who convinced me of this? Tony convinced me of this in an earlier chat when he was like, I'm not buying the Brock Purdy steam. And I'm on board with that. He's got me hyped up for it. I think the 49ers come into US Bank Stadium and leave with a big fat L.
So no Brock Purdy steam for Tony. Does that mean you're having a Vikings W here, Tony, following up the loss in week 1?
Yeah, I mean, I think US Bank Stadium will be rocking. Brock Purdy might be a little overwhelmed. Like I said, I could see him taking a step back, and I think the Vikings will put on a little pressure. Brian Flores, maybe a lot of blitzing in this game, and gets to Purdy, and the Vikings get the upset.
Will, are these guys crazy?
Yeah, a little bit. The Vikings beat the 49ers at US Bank last year, but they had Kirk Cousins. They only won that game because Brock Purdy got concussed and forgot where he was throwing the football and threw 2 terrible picks to Cam Bynum. So the 49ers are going to win this game.
All right. So we got a couple wins, couple losses there for the Vikings, though. Joe still has them undefeated to start the season. Joe, that means you're up for week 3 here. Vikings hosting the Texans. Stephon Diggs revenge game finally coming back after many years away to US Bank Stadium. Your thoughts on this one?
You know
Danielle
what?
Hunter, too.
Yeah, Danielle Hunter as well.
We're happy for all these guys, but I'm rooting openly because here at Bring Me the Sports and Vikings on SI, I am biased. That's just who I am. And I'm not afraid to admit it. But the Vikings are going to take down the Texans. Again, this is a home game. The Vikings will be 2-0, feeling very confident. Sam Darnold's going to have the monkey off his back. And you know what's going to happen is it's going to be the Blake Cashman and Jonathan Grenard show. So the Vikings take down Stephon Diggs. He'll be shadowed by Stephon Gilmore. This defense is going to be rocking. 3-0, baby. Let's go.
3-0 start for Joe for the Vikings. I always remember that it's a revenge game for Diggs and Hunter, but I always forget for some reason that Cashman and Grenard have the revenge game angle on this one as well. Tony, your thoughts after Joe's undefeated 3-0 start for the Vikings, which apparently at that point will be chanting Super Bowl contenders for the Vikings.
I'm actually serious, too. You guys don't get it.
Oh, no, we totally believe you're serious. We know you well enough to know that you're serious about this.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Joe. I think this game, they would have a better chance of winning than the 49ers. The Diggs factor, I think, will be interesting. I think there'll be a lot of emotion. And I think they'll be a live underdog. So I'm going to have a 2-1 start with a weird loss to the Giants to start the year.
2 straight wins against 2 contenders for the Super Bowl, supposedly, Will. Again, I ask you, are these guys crazy?
They were last week. This week they're not. I have the Vikings beating the Houston Texans. I think they'll win one of those 2 home games, weeks 2 and 3, in front of that raucous US Bank Stadium crowd.
All right, Nolan?
So I get to be the dissenter here. Nope, they're not going to win this game. CJ Stroud is good. He's going to be good again in the sophomore year here, and they're going to struggle to cover Diggs and Tank Dell.
I like it. Week 4 now, Tony. You're up here for the analysis. Vikings head to Lambeau in early season game out in Lambeau. They don't have to deal with the elements for the first time in a number of years. I'm thinking if you're watching the video, you understand where Joe's going with this one. But, Tony, you're up here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot pointing into the Vikings' favor in this game. Like you mentioned, the time of the year that they're playing, there won't be a huge home field advantage with the weather. And the Packers don't really have a strong wide receiver room. And there's not really a clear number 1 option there. And with the Vikings' question at cornerback, they probably will be able to match up well. But I'm kind of saying everything that favors the Vikings in this game, but I think they'll lose. I think it's tough on the road.
That's a bait and switch.
Yeah. Home field advantage matters a lot in the NFL. And Vikings fans know Lambeau Field, unfortunately, is a tough place to play. And I think they fall up short in this one.
Been a difficult stretch of games for Minnesota at Green Bay, though. They did win last year, Will, though that did come with the end of Kirk Cousins' time in Minnesota. Your projection for this game?
Yeah, I think the Vikings lose this game. Lambeau Field is a very tough place to play. I actually disagree with what Tony said about the receivers. They don't have a clear number 1, but they got like 5 guys: Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Wicks, even Bo Melton. There's one other, Jaden Reed is the other one I'm forgetting. Like, they got five dudes who are pretty good. So I think it's a really good team. It's a tough place to win. Packers win that game.
Is Jordan Love the version that we saw in the second half of last season, Nolan, or is he the version that we saw in the first half of last season?
I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be the second half version, and I don't like the Vikings' odds at Lambeau either. So I have another 3rd straight loss here after opening the season with a win.
All right, Joe, why are they undefeated to start the season?
You know, I actually do. I'm changing my mind on this one. I've been bitten too many times by
you guys convinced him.
The optimism going into Lambeau Field is always overblown, and what happens is usually a gong show. So that'll probably be the case once again. That's probably going to be the most challenging start of the season for Sam Darnold going into Lambeau. It's just never easy. That roster is very good. I'm not with you, Will, on the whole wide receiver depth thing. I just think they're kind of light from top to bottom in that department. And I think Josh Jacobs is actually a slight downgrade from Aaron Jones. So Jordan Love's fantastic. They got a good offensive line and a very good defense. People forget that Xavier McKinney comes into that secondary, and him and Jair Alexander make for a pretty elite 1-2 punch in the middle and the outside of that defense. So, yeah, Packers are tough. That's going to be the first loss of the year, 3-1.
Well, you guys convinced Joe to give the Vikings a rare L on the schedule here early in the season. So now, Will, it's your turn. Vikings head out to London, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, take on the New York Jets, take on maybe Aaron Rodgers if he can survive past 4 plays this season. What looks like another tough defense for the Jets. What are your expectations for this one, and what are you predicting?
Yeah, so I've got them 2-2 going into this game, and I do think they will lose this game, though I think it'll be close. Just the Jets really look like a team that's going to take a huge leap this year if Aaron Rodgers is able to stay healthy. Reports out of their camp have been that he still looks like the Aaron Rodgers who won back-to-back MVPs not that long ago. Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, the weapons are there. And then the defense is pretty unquestionably top 5 in the NFL. with Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams and all the pieces that they have on that side of the ball. So the Vikings are going to have to play really well across the pond to keep their. I think they've won every London game they've played.
They got the double doink last time.
Yeah, the Saints they won a couple years ago. I think they're 3-0. So this unfortunately might be the first loss that the diehard British Vikings fans see in person.
Sam Darnold revenge game here, Nolan. Does he get the W over the Jets in London?
No, he doesn't. I don't think Aaron Rodgers' Achilles is going to explode week 1 this year. I think he's going to be able to play and stay healthy, and I think he's going to do what we've unfortunately had to seen a lot of over the years, and he's going to carve up the Vikings.
Joe, you just have them coming off their first loss. Now they're heading overseas. Can they pull it together before the bye?
Yes, they can. The Vikings attacked London in 8:42. They sent 350 ships over to London in 8:51, and they will do it again in 2024. And one thing they have going in their favor, this is a legit thing that could happen. Aaron Rodgers will get lost on some podcast with Prince Charles or something like that, and it'll be a distraction all week long. The Jets are going to be in trouble. The Vikings are the surprise team in the NFL this season. They are 4-1 coming back home to Minnesota.
I don't know my Royals that well, but I thought... Oh, wait, which one was moved to California and left? I thought that was Charles. I don't know.
It's
I'm confused
Harry.
at this point.
Harry.
Harry.
That's Harry. Yeah. Harry's been ousted. He's been ousted from that family, just like Aaron Rodgers was ousted from his family. And
Well, I
Tim
think
Walton was ousted from his family.
Don't we understand why Aaron Rodgers was ousted from his family after all his...
Isn't Charles
recent...
the king, not the prince?
I don't know. Again, this isn't a Royals podcast. This is...
I don't know.
I think we're getting off course here a little bit.
Tony, correct us here. Do they round us out here? Do they beat the Jets?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Will. I think the Jets are going to be pretty good this year. They have really no holes on the roster, and if Aaron Rodgers even plays to 80% of what he has been, they're going to be one of the better teams in the NFL. I think they're going to kind of be motivated with Sam Darnold, and they don't want to lose to the quarterback they moved on from, and I think the Vikings struggle in this one.
Absolutely. So then they head into the bye. They get that week off to rest and recuperate and come back to America. Then they head out to Detroit, or they host Detroit, excuse me. Nolan, do they find a way to beat the Super Bowl contender Lions?
Yeah, I have them on a bit of a losing streak coming into this one, but they're back at home, and I'm still not sold on Jared Goff. I think he's good, but I think the Lions are – I think they can be good, but I also think they can be kind of mediocre. So I think that they'll be able to manage a win here. Division rivalry, those games are always a little tougher. They're at home. I think they get a win.
Vikings 0-2 last year against the Lions. Joe, can they overturn that this year in game one against them?
The Lions are on a bit of a run against the Vikings. It's kind of the tide has turned there. That's the best team in the NFL in my opinion. I think the Vikings can compete with them season long in the division race and keep it very interesting. But I think that offensive line got a little bit better with Kevin Zeitler coming over from Baltimore. They got DJ Reader on the defensive line from Cincinnati. They're going to be extremely tough. I'm not optimistic that Minnesota is going to beat them even at home.
Tony, then Will.
Yeah, I have the Vikes dropping their third straight in this one. I think the Lions are going to be the class of the division again, and I think they struggle.
I think the Vikings win this game. They're coming off a loss in London. They get the bye week to kind of lick their wounds. The Lions will be coming off a tough trip to Dallas the week before this game. And I've got TJ Hawkinson making his 2024 debut after the bye against his old team and the team that he got injured against last December. So I think the Vikings find a way to pull this one out in Week 7.
That's right. This should have been the game that we saw J.J. McCarthy possibly get his first snaps in a regular game, and now we don't get that because of the meniscus injury. But, Joe, now they head out to L.A. The last time we saw the Rams and Vikings play each other in L.A., it was a wild affair. Do we get something similar out at that $2 billion stadium that hosted the Super Bowl a couple years ago?
Probably. It's the game plan free week because it's Thursday night football, right? But
Yeah.
the Rams will be playing at home. They won't have to travel back home before they play that game, so they just get to stay there and then take on the Vikings on a Thursday night. The Vikings are coming off of probably a meat grinder against the Lions after a trip overseas. They could be really banged up in that performance. So I'm going with the Rams. Vikings fall to 4-3 in this situation.
Ooh, bit of a losing streak for the Vikings here. Tony, Matthew Stafford was on fire last year, showed some some semblances that he could regain that, but he's a little bit older now, obviously. What are your expectations for this one?
Yeah, I think the Vikings are going to struggle against the Rams receivers, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, one of the best duos in the league, and I have them losing their fourth straight in this one.
No Aaron Donald for the Rams, though. He retired in the offseason. Will, can the Vikings get it done?
They can. I don't think they will. I have predicted them to lose in this game and fall to 4-4 in my picks here. So I think the Rams are good. Sean McVay still there. Stafford's still there. The receivers. It's always going to be a fun storyline when McVay and O'Connell go against each other. But I think this will be a loss for the Vikings.
Will the apprentice get one over on the teacher, Nolan?
I also don't think so. I think you're coming off that game with Detroit. It's going to be a really fast turnaround. It's going to be a really tough game that I think they will have just won. But then you got to go and play Stafford and Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, and I think that's just going to be too much for them to handle.
So with that game on Thursday night, the Vikings will get a sort of mini bye. They'll have that weekend off, and then the following weekend they will host the Colts, who the last time they played at US Bank Stadium, we all know what happened. The most epic comeback in regular season football history. Tony, can the Vikings get the win in regulation this time? They don't have to hopefully pull it out and pull out a 33-point comeback and find a way to win. Can they beat the Colts and Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, I think Anthony Richardson, he's getting a lot of hype this year, and he's still really green as a quarterback. He hasn't had much experience kind of dating back to college, and I think he might struggle throughout the year. And I think how the schedule works out, I think this is a good game for the Vikings to maybe get back on track. And I think they match up well versus the Colts, and I think they pull out the win in this one.
Will, Nolan, and Joe.
Yeah, I'm with Tony. I think the Vikings get it done here. Anthony Richardson has the looks of somebody who could be really dangerous, but still there's probably going to be some up and downs for him as a passer, which I think Brian Flores can take advantage of.
Yeah, I am also not buying into the Anthony Richards hype, not because I don't think he'll be good, but just because it's too early to tell. And I think the Vikings will be able to get it done without a historic comeback against the Colts.
Yeah, I think the Vikings are facing some pressure to get back in the win column here with a couple of straight losses. So, Colts lose by a couple of touchdowns, more than likely, at Minneapolis.
Vikings in conceivably the easier part of their schedule now. Head down to Jacksonville. Will, do they take care of the Jaguars?
Yeah, they've got this little run where they play 3 straight AFC South teams, a division that generally is not one of the better divisions in football. I think they go to Jacksonville and they find a way to get a win. This is a big year for Trevor Lawrence, and is he actually good? Is he just kind of decent? Is he bad? It's a big sample size now, but we still aren't quite sure what Lawrence is for Jacksonville. So I think the Vikings are able to go there and win a second straight game against that division.
Nolan?
Yeah, I'm with Will. I think this is kind of where they're going to trick us into thinking they could make a push for the playoffs, and they rattle off a couple straight wins. I think they'll beat Trevor Lawrence. I think, like Will said, I think he's kind of just he's a pretty okay range, and I think the Vikings will be able to get it done.
Can the Vikings actually get it done against Trevor Lawrence at home in Jacksonville for the Jaguars in this one, Joe?
Ezra Cleveland revenge game. But that's not the storyline. Jaguars actually have a pretty interesting receiving trio with the rookie Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. If he's anything like the other LSU guys, he's going to be a beast. And by all accounts, he's looked really good in preseason and training camp. Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Travis Etienne Jr. They have a decent looking roster up and down. But again, until they prove it, I'm not going to buy it. You ask me this in a month and a half, I might change my tune. But right now, I'm taking the Vikings.
Tony?
Yeah, I kind of agree with everyone. I guess we're on the same page here. I think the Jaguars don't really scare me. Trevor Lawrence still has a lot of questions to answer, and I think the Vikings can kind of go on a streak here at this part of their schedule.
I think we can call that the trap game because all 4 of you picked the Vikings, and we know what happens when every single analyst all chooses the same team. It's always going to go the opposite way. So, Nolan, the end of the AFC South stretch here, Vikings head to Tennessee to take on the Titans, who I think are one of the teams favored to be one of the worst teams in football this year. Your expectations for this one?
Yeah, I am not too high on the Titans. I think this is, like I said, where the Vikings are going to trick us into thinking that they're going to make the playoffs. I think they win that one pretty handily, get their third straight win. Another team with a quarterback who hasn't proved it yet. I think they're going to be able to get the job done against a team that really probably is not going to be very good this year.
Will Levis, is he going to take it? Is he going to take apart Brian Flores' defense, or is it going to go the other way around, Joe?
It's the other way around. Vikings win. Easy.
Tony, and then Will.
I think the Titans might surprise some people this year. I think they have a solid receiving core, and after I picked the Vikings to lose week one of the Giants, I think they fall to another one of these teams that are supposed to be one of the worst in the league. I think that kind of doesn't always shake out exactly how people plan, and I think the Titans take down the Vikings in this one.
Yeah, there's never any automatic wins when you're a team with Sam Darnold at quarterback, unless he really surprises. So, especially on the road, the Vikings could absolutely lose this game. But I've got them. I had them beating the Texans earlier in the season, and I've got them sweeping the AFC South and winning their third straight game in Nashville in this one.
Then the Vikings head to Chicago for the final game of their 3-game road trip. We know, Joe, that trips to Chicago never go as planned. It's always one of the quirkiest places for the Vikings to go. Will the Vikings overturn that and get the better of Caleb Williams in their first of what appears to be many, many showdowns with the number one overall pick?
I've gone through the schedule of every team in the NFC, and I've got the Bears at 6 wins. I know a lot of people are pretty high on them. I'm not one of them. I'm not ready to crown them even a 500 team just yet. Caleb Williams probably has a very bright future, but Brian Flores is a very experienced quarterback killer on the defensive side, and I think he's going to give the rookie a lot of problems. Vikings go into Windy City and take that one.
Tony?
Yeah, I think at this time of the year we might see the Bears starting to peak. They might start out a little slow. I kind of agree with Joe, but I think the Vikings are going to struggle against their dynamic group of receivers, and I think the Bears pull out this one.
Will the Bears added a number of receiving options for Caleb Williams. Will they find success against the Vikings defense?
I think they will. I have the Vikings losing this game. You mentioned it earlier that just Soldier Field's been a weird place for the Vikings to play. And it's kind of not great that they don't get their first matchup against the Bears until later in the season, because you'd love to maybe face Caleb Williams earlier on when he's still figuring some stuff out. I think by this point, he's going to be playing pretty well with that offense. So I got the Bears winning that one.
Nolan?
Yeah, I agree. I think I have them splitting with all of the division rivals, and you could take home or road. I think road is more likely that they lose. I think they lose this one. I think Caleb he's going to be good. I think as much as NFC North fans would like him to be a bust, it's not going to happen.
Vikings open up December, Tony, at home against the Cardinals. Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr. What are we expecting from this one? What's your prediction for Vikings-Cardinals?
Yeah, I think the Cardinals are going to be another sneaky team this year. I think Kyler Murray could kind of have a bounce-back year. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a great receiver. But I think the Vikings having this game at home will bode well for them. And I think while the Cardinals might surprise some people, I think the Vikings are just a better team. And facing them at home kind of plays into their hand, and I think they win this one.
Will, is Kyler Murray back to being his old self, or is that or the MVP form that we saw in the first half of a couple seasons ago, or is he going to regress?
I hope so. I just had my one fantasy draft last night, and I drafted Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. So
putting all your eggs in the Cardinals basket.
I'm big on the Cardinals this year. I think this will be a sneaky loss for the Vikings at home to a Cardinals offense that I think is going to be better than people expect.
Nolan and Joe.
Yeah, I am not. I'm on the Kyler Murray regression. I don't see it coming back. I think the Vikings are going to be able to take care of business.
The Vikings will be 9-3 after this game. This is a cakewalk. This might be the easiest game on the schedule, you guys. Honest to God, it's like, what are the Cardinals going to do? I love the fantasy aspect because they're going to be down by 3 touchdowns every week and just gunslinging every single day. So you're going to get the Nick Mullins effect, but you're not going to win any games, and they sure as hell aren't going to win in Minnesota.
No, absolutely not. I don't think the Cardinals will win that one. I think I have the Vikings that one. But then The Vikings host the second game of 3 in a row, but it is the biggest game, I would imagine, that people were penciling in their schedules when they saw it. Vikings hosting the Falcons. Kirk Cousins coming back to town after he left for Atlanta. Will, your analysis of this one and your pick?
Yeah, this will be probably the most anticipated game on the Vikings schedule. How will fans at US Bank Stadium react to Kirk Cousins? Because there was a lot of frustration with him early in his tenure when he was signed to take them over the top and then didn't do that. And they really struggled at the end of the Mike Zimmer era. And then that started to switch early in the Kevin O'Connell era. And, the whole Kirk O'Chains persona in 2022. And by the end last year, Kirk's shirtless at the stadium, firing people up when he was hurt for a big game late in the year. And I think it'll be a positive reception for the most part, maybe a little mixed, but what a game this is going to be. The Falcons have a chance to be really improved this year. Raheem Morris, Zach Robinson, Kirk Cousins. Let me check what I had. I have the Vikings winning this game because the fans are going to be fired up. Brian Flores and Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings are going to be fired up. I think they take down Big Kirko in this one.
Nolan, Kirk Cousins saw plenty of Brian Flores' defense last season. Does that help him out in this game?
I think it does, but I still think the Vikings are going to pull this one off. I think it's tough that he's coming back to US Bank Stadium. I do think he will get a positive reception, but I think that'll be a tough environment to play, and I think the Vikings will do enough. I don't necessarily think he'll play bad, but I think the Vikings will do enough to ruin his homecoming.
I don't know the ins and outs off the top of my head of the schedule flexing, but Joe, is this one going to get flexed to prime time because of what's at stake and where you have this team, the Vikings, I believe, at 9-3 at this point, and what the meaning of this game for both of these teams is?
It's a good point. I mean, the Falcons are probably going to be in the mix in the South. The Vikings are still in the mix in my mind in the North at 9-3. They'll be 10-3 after this one. I don't think we're going to see Kirk's chiseled abs, that shirt coming off in that way, but I wouldn't be surprised if his jersey's ripped off his back because, that's a 36-year-old one Achilles man trying to run from a pretty dangerous pass rush in Minnesota. I'm a buyer. On this defense, and I believe the Vikings take him down in his return. It's not going to be very pretty for him. I'm not seeing much success there. Unless Ray McLeod is really good and Kyle Pitts can actually catch. Maybe he'll surprise us.
Tony, will it beat Kirk Cousins by that point, or will the Falcons pull the trigger and put Michael Penix Jr. in at that point?
Yeah, I don't know how much of an impact Ray McLeod will have in this game, but I'm probably going to lean with the Vikings. The Falcons are the favorites in the NFC South, but I still think they have plenty of questions all over that roster. And I think the Vikings are just as good as the Falcons this year. And being that they're at home in this one, I think there'll be too many emotions for Kirk, and I think the Vikings will pull this one out.
Vikings close out their 3-game homestand, Nolan, hosting the Bears on Monday Night Football, their second time in 4 games playing the Bears. Your prediction for this one?
Yeah, again, I think they'll split with all these NFC North teams. I think those games are always hard to win 2 of. And I think, Caleb Williams is still a rookie, and while I think he'll be really good, I think there will be moments of up and down, and I think US Bank Stadium will be a tough place to play against a division rival.
Joe, then Tony, then Will.
Yeah, it was October 14th of last year where Caleb Williams had to face a really good defense in Notre Dame, and he was crying on the sidelines after that game. And I think you're going to see something similar at US Bank Stadium in this matchup. 11-3, the Vikings win.
11-3, Tony.
Yeah, I agree. I think this it's hard to beat a team twice. I had the Vikings losing to the Bears earlier in the year, so I think I'll agree with Joe, and I think Caleb Williams has struggles in this game at US Bank Stadium, and the Vikings come out on top.
Will?
Yeah, I don't think Brian Flores is going to lose twice to a rookie quarterback, even the number 1 overall pick.
So then the Vikings head out the following week, to Seattle to take on the Seahawks, a team that the Vikings seem to always play every single year out in Seattle. Joe, are they going to pull off the what I imagine at this point is the expected win, because I think you have the Vikings at, 10-3, you said?
I have them at 11-3 at this
11-3.
This is when the 7-game win streak ends. It's just really hard to go out to Seattle and win. I think it's a good, strong football team, especially at home, just historically a very difficult place to play. The Vikings will be riding pretty high, but at that point in the season, I think it's time for an L. 11-4.
Geno Smith going to get the better of the Vikings, Tony?
Yeah, the Seahawks are an interesting team this year, but I agree with Joe. I think Seattle's one of the toughest places to play, and I think the Vikings drop this one.
They've got some strong receivers out there in Seattle, Will. Are the Vikings cornerbacks going to hold up, and will the Vikings get the W here?
I think they can. I actually have them at 8-6 going into this game, and there'll be a lot on the line. I got them going into Seattle and finding a way to win this game. They're not Seattle's not a bad team. I just don't see them being great this year.
Nolan?
Yeah, I think the Vikings are kind of hoping Sam Darnold is like a resurgent like Geno Smith, but Geno Smith has already proven he's resurgent. That's a tough, tough stadium to play in. I don't think they get it done.
2 games left in the season, Tony. Vikings hosting the Packers. We know how this one went last year, where the Packers just ran roughshod over. A mess of quarterback situation for the Vikings at US Bank Stadium. Do the Vikings get a semblance of a revenge this year and get the W at home against Green Bay?
Yeah, I think at this point of the season, we might start seeing the Vikings' kind of lack of depth catch up to them, and might have a few injuries here and there. And the Packers are going to be in the mix at the top of the NFC. So I have them losing this game and going 0-2 against the Packers. Unfortunately, as much as that pains me to say, I just don't think they match up that well against them. Will kind of swayed me on their receivers, and I have them losing this one.
Will, can the Vikings pull off the upset here and get the better of Green Bay?
Yeah, well, I don't know how much of an upset it'll be, depending on how these two teams are doing with this game being in Minneapolis. But we've seen this movie before with the Vikings having a big late season game against the Packers, playoffs on the line, things like that. And they've gotten it done before. 2015, 2021, they won this game, but it also has gone poorly for them at times as well. And I think that'll be what happens here. I think the Packers are going to come into US Bank Stadium and deliver a pretty soul-crushing blow to the Vikings in this one.
Nolan, are the Vikings' playoffs hopes dashed at this point against the Green Bay Packers, or do they stay alive with a win against the Packers?
I think they get a win and improve to 9-7 and give themselves a chance in the last week of the season to get a playoff spot here.
Joe?
12-4. The Vikings, they're going to have clinched the playoff spot by this point. And so will Green Bay. Green Bay is going to be great this year. So will Detroit. The NFC North's loaded.
NFC North going to have 3 playoff teams in your predictions, Joe?
I really do believe so, yeah.
Wow. All right. Final game of the season, Will. What's up?
I'll elaborate in a little bit.
Okay. Final game of the season. Before you guys make this pick, reset where I believe your records are at this point, heading into the final week of the season, and then make your pick. But, Will, Vikings heading out to Green Bay, once again closing out the season in Detroit because you'd rather close out your season nowhere else but Detroit.
Yeah, it seems like they end the year against the Lions a lot. The Vikings, in my prediction here, are 9-7, coming off a tough loss to the Packers, and they're probably just still barely hanging on to the win and need some help to get into that 6 or 7 seed in the NFC. And maybe the Lions will have some seeding to play for because I think the Vikings lose this game. And they go from 9-6 and on the doorstep of the playoffs to falling short with really crushing losses to the Packers and Lions because there would be nothing more Vikings than for that to happen.
Absolutely. Nolan?
Yeah, I think I probably kind of teased it earlier, but yeah, I think like Will said, I have them at 9-7 going into this game, where they probably need a win and get a little bit of help to make the playoffs. And I think the Lions are just a better team. They beat them, and they go 9-8 and get a middle of the road draft pick and don't make the playoffs and just kind of have nothing to show from this year.
Joe, be our ray of optimism and light here and hope for this season.
13.
I don't have the Vikings winning this game, but it drops them to 12-5, and they're in the playoffs, right? Like I said, I think the Lions are the best team in football. They're the favorite in my mind to go to the Super Bowl and even potentially win it in the NFC. So, there's a lot of mediocrity in this conversation. Not that you guys are mediocre, but
Joe's calling us mediocre, guys.
Selling them as like a fringe playoff team, and I get it, I really do, but I can't seem to shake this whole 13-4 in Kevin O'Connell's rookie coaching season. He gets Brian Flores, a big adjustment last year. They win 7 games despite Justin Jefferson missing half the season and Kirk Cousins missing more than half of the season. You're throwing out scrubs left and right, and they still found a way to be extremely competitive until the very end. I mean, yeah, they are thin at a lot of position groups, and an injury could derail things, but if they stay healthy, this team could very well be contending for one of the best records in the NFC this season. I firmly believe that. I'm not thinking that this is a rebuild mode season at all. I think the players are buying into it. They have a legit shot, guys. I think the NFC North is loaded, and I've got them finishing 12-5.
All right, Tony. Joe just gassed us up. He got us all excited and hyped for the Vikings this season. Talk us down. Ruin it for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm lowest on the Vikings this year out of all of you guys.
Apparently.
7-9 going into this game, and I think they'll lose again to the Lions, go 0-2 on the year. And I just have a lot of questions about the health is the biggest thing. That's one of the biggest factors in football at any level is staying healthy the whole year. And the Vikings are already starting off the wrong foot with McCarthy's injury, waiting for Hawkinson to come back. And if they have any more, I think it could kind of scream disaster at some points of the season. So I have them finishing 7-10 and dropping to the Lions last game of the year.
So we got a 7-10, we got a pair of 9-8s, and Joe at 12-5. So clearly, opinions are mixed on this team. So let's go around the horn here. Who's the most valuable player for the Vikings this season? You can't say Justin Jefferson because we already know that. So anybody but Justin Jefferson. I'll start with you, Will, then Nolan, then Joe, then Tony.
The most valuable outside of Justin Jefferson is probably Christian Darrisaw or Jonathan Grenard, somebody like that. I think the most important is quite obviously Sam Darnold. And to kind of sum up my thoughts on the season of them going 9-8, I'll just say that if they go 9-8, you're beating the Vegas projection of 6.5 still pretty easily. And I think if this Vikings team still had Kirk Cousins, they could definitely be in the mix to win 11, maybe 12 games if things go right, because we know they're going to play a lot of close games. But the quarterback, Sam Darnold, I think they made the right decision to move on from Kirk Cousins and usher in what has now become the J.J. McCarthy era. I think they'll be in a lot of games. I just don't have faith in Sam Darnold because we haven't seen it in the NFL. I think 9-8 is a little optimistic. So we'll see what happens here. Again, would it totally and utterly shock me if they went 12-5? Yeah, actually it would. But anything can happen in the NFL. That's why we love it. It's fun. We'll see. I just think Darnold's going to really be kind of a roller coaster this year.
Nolan?
Yeah, I think I guess the most valuable in a way is kind of Sam Darnold, even though you don't really know what he's going to be. I think we saw what happened when Kirk Cousins went down last year. We'd get more of that show if Sam Darnold does go down. So they do need him to stay healthy. And if there is any hope of them going 12-5, it's going to have to be with Sam Darnold at the helm and kind of showing us something he hasn't shown us before. And I think it'll be really interesting to see with the weapons around him, with the offensive scheme that Kevin O'Connell has, if he can, turn his career around.
Joe?
Well, I think Wes Phillips, Vikings offensive coordinator Wes Phillips, had a good point earlier this week when he said, when you have a good running back, they make the offensive line look better. And again, last year they won 7 games without their quarterback, without their best wide receiver for bulk of the season, without a running game. So, and a first-year defensive coordinator. So there was a lot of reasons for them to suck, like top 3 picks suck, and they didn't. So if they stay healthier, second year of Brian Flores, the most important player on the team besides Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson, in my mind, is going to be Aaron Jones, because he could open things up big time for that offense and actually give them some semblance of a running game. So I'm going to go Aaron Jones, and these are all the reasons why I'm pretty optimistic on the Vikings.
I like that pick. I like that pick because it means Kevin O'Connell finally learned how to operate a run game, and that's exciting for this Vikings offense.
It helps when you have a running back.
It certainly does. Tony,
I guess I'll go on the other side again. Aaron Jones is 29 years old, and he's kind of dealt with a lot of injuries in his career. And you never want to predict injuries, but him staying healthy for the entire season with only Ty Chandler behind him. He's going to have a huge workload. So that's a big question I'm going to have if he can stay healthy the whole year. I do think he will be very important, but I think his health will also be very important. And I think on the defensive side of the ball, I'll go with Stephon Gilmore because with all of these wide receivers we talked about, the Bears, the Seahawks, the Packers, all these teams, the NFL is so pass happy now. The Vikings have a lot of questions at cornerback. And I think for them to reach their full potential this year, they're going to need Gilmore performing at a high level.
Absolutely. Good stuff from you guys today. It's been fun picking through these schedules. We'll continue our Vikings previews throughout the week, building up to week 1. Vikings at New York Giants. Looking forward to this one. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button here on YouTube. Helps us out a great deal. And also, go read all of our work over at Vikings on SI. Twins, Timberwolves, Gophers, and Badgers on SI as well. We cover it all. Boys, we'll talk to you tomorrow. And Minnesota sports fans, we'll come back right back to this channel for another topic based on Minnesota Vikings previewing week 1.